What's up, DIY Queens? It's your design bestie, Kara Newhart, and this is Make Space.
It's me again, and welcome back to Make Space. Today, we're going to do a little Q&A. We grabbed all the questions from Instagram that everyone's been sending, and I guess first of all, if you would like to submit a question, you can DM on Instagram at MakeSpacePod or email podcast@neverskipbrunch.com, because I think we're going to start doing these regularly because I think it's so fun for it to be like a full conversation where you get to ask questions and get specific help, whether it's a question about an episode, something we talked about, like a really good thought, a project you're working on, something you really messed up and are struggling with. And I'm excited because there's some really good questions on here. So yeah, let's just dive right in. Number one, I'm DIYing on a budget, but I want to get myself something nice for Christmas. What tool or item do you recommend spending a little money on, i.e., what tool would I really notice an upgrade with? This is such a good question. I will start by saying I'm a firm believer that it's not the tool, it's the maker. So, what that means is developing your skill set is more important than buying expensive tools because you can honestly make super incredible things with just a few tools if you teach yourself how to use them and techniques. That being said, sometimes less expensive tools are harder to use in the sense that they have less features. There's things like vibration, that it can just be harder to use if your skill set isn't developed. So there are some cases when upgrading the tool is actually going to be easier on you as a beginner. The best example, and this is such a niche tool, is a scroll saw. Like the basic scroll saws. A scroll saw is pretty much like a sewing machine, but as a saw, like a tiny blade, and you can kind of cut like really intricate designs. It's what I made this sign with. Perfect. We have an example. The sign, if you're listening, not watching, the sign in my podcast studio that has my name in cursive, I used with plywood and a scroll saw. So that's how I cut out all the like little baby curves. So that when I was first starting, I got like the entry level. It was like $160. And that thing like rattled, like the whole saw was like bing, 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 like jumping up and down. And you couldn't cut anything straight, especially not as a beginner. So then I upgraded to the DeWalt one, which was like a huge investment, like $500, because at that time I was making a ton of signs. And it's like so easy to use. So the best example, that's like if you're going to be a sign person, that's the tool you would buy. But for the everyday DIYer, you're probably going to upgrade your miter saw. Miter saws have a wide range as you go up in price of added features and added size. So the cheapest, most affordable saw you could buy is probably like an 8-inch saw. No matter the brand, like just if you go to Home Depot, the one you'll see on the cheap end, 8-inch saw. And this is the saw, remember, that's on a hinge. So as you're making your cuts, it's also called a chop saw. You're just like pulling the blade down. So the cheap saw, it can turn side to side, and it's 8 inches, which is the blade, like, what is it, circumference? Like how wide the blade is, basically. And that's how wide it can cut. So as you go up, you're going to get the blade size is going to go up from 8 to 10 to 12, which means that you can cut wider things instead of teeny tiny trim. Now you could cut 2x4s, plywood, 1x8s, like you can make a lot wider cuts. And you're going to get an added feature that's called a bevel. So basically, the miter is when you use the little handle and you turn the saw to an angle. And a bevel is when the actual blade itself tilts side to side. So when you do both of those and can set both of them as an angle, it's going to give you what's called a compound miter cut. You would use that for like crown molding, where you're actually cutting two angles for it to fit together and stick out. So it's an angle for the two pieces to fit together. It's an angle because the board is sticking out at an angle, because crown molding is installed at a 45-degree angle. So, and then other things you're going to get is like a laser that will help you see, like it shows you where things are going to be cut. and it shines a laser on your wood. So it's a lot easier if you're a beginner to have that as a guide to help you. So if you're upgrading your saw, what I would recommend is that you go for a 10 or 12 inch miter saw and you look for a compound miter saw. I have the one that's like full blown 12 inch DeWalt compound miter saw because I use it every day. But I worked for 4 years on a Ryobi 10 inch miter saw and made like incredible things. The DeWalt one is a little bit smoother, but the hack, if you don't necessarily have the money to spend $500 on a saw and you want to go for that like 250 to 300 range, get the Ryobi one and upgrade your blade. So the blade that comes with it is like decent. But if you upgrade your blade to a Diablo fine tooth blade, so basically the red blade that's in stock at Home Depot, fine tooth blades have a lot smaller teeth and a lot more of them. So when you're cutting things, it's not going to splinter your wood as badly. And then you're going to get really smooth cuts and it's going to cut through easier. So just changing your blade, you're going to notice your saw feels like a higher end saw and a more expensive saw. Those are like 30 to 50 bucks and they last a while. And then the blade that usually comes with it, like that would be more for if you're using like you're just cutting 2x4s to frame and the cut's going to be in a wall and no one's going to see it. It's not like a fine, like finished blade or finished cut like you would have with trim. So yeah, upgrading a tool, I would say miter saw, and I would say 10 inch compound saw, upgrade your blade, and you're going to notice a huge difference. Okay, number 2, I'm going to stop saying numbers because we're going to get out of order. Okay, the next one is I have rooms in my house that feel empty, but I don't necessarily have a good spot for additional furniture without starting to feel cluttered. What do you like to use to fill up a room, or is it just my imagination and it's fine as is? This is a really good question. And the first thing I will say is there's spaces that are allowed to be empty. Like not every area in your room has to have something going on. If you took art class and you learned about negative space, like intentionally choosing places where things are not can be just as important as choosing where things are. And that's because as you take in a room, as you're like looking around a room or, you know, living in a room, your eye needs space to breathe. If you've ever gone to like an antique store where there's just stuff everywhere, it's like hard to even know where to look and what to focus on because there's so many things and they're of equal interest. So you kind of just like dart around the room, you miss a lot of stuff because there's like too much to look at. And the same effect can happen in your house. So generally, traditional design theory has said like every room needs to have a primary focal point that's the focus of the room, and then everything else kind of supports it. So, for example, like in a living room, you have the fireplace TV wall that's like the main wall. All the furniture faces it, and that's your focal point. And then everywhere around the room, you would have supporting elements like pieces of art or mirrors or lighting. So when you're first starting out with design, that's the most like easy way to approach it is like think of where's my focal point in this room. And then when there's a blank corner, if it really feels blank, like it really feels empty, you can fill it with things like a plant, a floor mirror. I really love floor mirrors because in and of themselves, they don't like have a lot going on, but they expand the space, make it feel bigger and bounce the light around. So that's good if you don't like want to add another element that's pulling your eye, like a piece of art with a lot of color. So plants, mirrors, and then you could do art if it's like an actual blank space where you're like, ooh, the focal point is on this side of the room and it's making this other side of the room feel unbalanced because it doesn't have anything going on. So it's like all the weight is over on the focal point side. You could do like kind of a piece of art or a credenza to like balance it out. So that's what you're thinking in terms of like negative space, filling up space. Go for things that aren't necessarily like, don't take up a lot of room, like a mirror or a like tree potted plant. And so then you're not like crowding your furniture, just adding more and more furniture. And when you are making a furniture plan, what I like to do is map everything out first on a floor plan. Just get a piece of paper, sketch out the basic measurements, and then kind of see how the flow of things are. So, like in front of the door, is there enough space to get into the room? And as you go around, like how are things flowing in terms of where you're going to walk in the space that you need to access? And does that make sense? So, this is huge in living rooms with like a couch and chairs in the middle. You see a lot of times people do 2 chairs next to each other, and so that you can walk between them to get in and out of like the furniture grouping, things like that. That's called space planning. And that might be easier for you on a floor plan to kind of see it top down, bird's eye view, or it might be easier to just move all your stuff around and see it for real in the space. But yeah, filling up a room, I would say plants and mirrors you can never go wrong with those. And then if you need something that has more visual weight or color, look at art, sculpture, or other little pieces of furniture like an accent chair or ottoman or little bench or something like that. Okay, the next one. Do I have any good DIY gift ideas? What tools do I need to make it? And have I ever made something that I found people really loved and wanted? Yes, there's a few options here. So if you are wanting to use power tools, I would make some cutting boards. The way I like to make these is go to Home Depot and look for the hardwood, which is sold by the foot. So you're looking for, in Home Depot, they have red oak, poplar, or sometimes maple, depending on where you get it. Get a 1x10 or 1x12 board, and then however many feet you need. I like to use about 1 to 1.5 feet per cutting board. And then you can either use your miter saw to just cut these into rectangles, or you could use a jigsaw and kind of cut out like a handle out of it to make it a little more dimensional. I have a really good friend on Instagram, Dom, that makes these. He calls them puzzle boards, and he cuts it so that the handle of one board like fits into the next board as a puzzle. And so you can put the whole board out on like the middle of a table, make a charcuterie board, or individually you can use them one at a time. And they're just like really pretty, really easy to make. So then after you make that cut, whether it's straight or curvy, you can sand it down with your orbital sander or a block sander if you don't have the electric one. So you're just going to sand it really smooth. I would sand it with 100 grit, 180 grit, and then 320 grit. So it's going to be a really, really smooth finish. And then you're going to seal it with a food safe oil if you're going to be using it to serve actual food, or polyurethane if it's just decorative, but make sure to let people know if it's not food safe. So food safe oil, they have like actual cutting board oil just at Home Depot you can grab or online, and you're just going to seal it, let it soak into the wood, and it's going to give it like a nice finish, and it'll just kind of bring out the wood grain. And then if it's decorative, you could use stain or that polyurethane. So that's a really fun one for power tools. Non-power tool options, one of my favorites is go to Goodwill and thrift like a bowl or a ceramic dish or glassware and make your own candle. So you can grab little wicks, you can grab the wax, and then scents, and you just melt it down, scent your wax, and then you can make candles. And you can make like really big ones that would normally sell for like $200 and make it for really affordable. And they're really pretty. They're good statement pieces. You just want to make sure that the dish or glassware you're getting is like heat safe, because otherwise it could break. So be very careful if you are new to that and do a lot of research, or just opt for like ceramic so that you know it's safe. But that's really fun to do. Another one I really like is flour sack towels. So it's like a kitchen towel, but not terry cloth fabric. It's like thin and flat. So it's really good for painting. You can either paint, you can draw with like markers and monogram them, or you can use stamps and like fabric markers, fabric paint. And those are really fun because you can really personalize them, and then they're functional as well. And they're very affordable in a pack of a lot. So you can kind of like crank a bunch out, give everybody like a 4-pack. And they're really fun for kids too, to get to like paint. And you could do a design all over or just in the corner. So those are special. I would say overall, I really love DIY gifts that are like usable and practical and functional. So that's kind of how I skew all of mine, but there's tons of decor ideas as well. I would just type in DIY gift ideas into Pinterest if you're really struggling and just scroll. And there's a lot of interesting ideas where you could kind of take it and make it your own. But those are probably my very favorite ones to make. The next one, what are my favorite stocking stuffers for DIYers? Any little tools or items you didn't know you needed? Anything you always need more of? This is a fun question too. I think I actually have a whole like stocking stuffer list, gift guide on my blog, neverskipbrunch.com, so you can check that out. But a few of the favorites would be number one, mini tape measures. I love them so much. I keep one in my purse so that when I'm shopping, like at Home Goods for a vase or a little piece of furniture or at Home Depot, I always have something on hand to measure so that I know something's going to fit. And they're just like easy and fun to carry around. They're usually like the 6 foot or 9 foot size. Another one. Oh, well, me and Jesse at Let's DIY Big, we have our project pen, and it's like a pen that has a level inside of it and then a tape measure on the pen so you can like measure things. It has a little screwdriver on the end and a stylus. It's like a 7-in-1 pen, and those are so fun. So you can grab one of those. I also like little baby screwdrivers. Like I have this little one that I don't know what it's actually called, but I named it Stubert. And it's just this little like stumpy screwdriver that's like a ratchet screwdriver. It has flat heads and Phillips heads, and you can flip it. It has like 2 sizes, and it comes in handy for like tight to reach places where you couldn't get a drill. And it definitely fits in a stocking. What else? Safety glasses, like some cute safety glasses. I feel like I always need more of those because I'm always like losing them. But yeah, those are like my favorites. But I will find that podcast or that blog post and link it for you so that you have links and then even more ideas. The next one. I really love this question. I don't understand accent walls. What's the point of painting one wall a different color? Now, listen, this is a good question because lots of other people also hate accent walls. They're pretty divisive in the design community. A lot of interior designers are very anti-accent wall because they think it's like bad design, like it's an easy way out kind of. So let's talk about the point of accent walls, like how they came to be. So back to that concept of like create a focal point in the room. That was like traditional design. And in going to design school, like that's something that used to be like design 101 is like your room needs an accent, a focal point. And then after you find the focal point on one wall, you need to balance the rest of the space around it. So accent walls were kind of like, we don't have a focal point in this room that's a box that has no architectural interest going on. So we'll make one by painting one wall a different color. It also has the effect of, like, if you choose a really dark color, you don't have to paint the whole room that color and make it look really dark. You can just do one wall. So you're able to add a fun or moody color into the space without it feeling overwhelming, like the whole room is that color. And then it really kind of helps contrast things and create depth. So like in a bedroom, for example, if you are painting the wall behind your headboard, like a moody color, like that cracked pepper from Bear that I am painting everything in my house, including the outside. And then your bed is like white or beige. It's going to create a lot of depth and dimension. And when you put your lamps on your nightstands in front of it, it's going to make it look very like, I don't know, polished and very thought out because there's a lot of depth, dimension, interest going on. And it was simple, right? You just had to use paint to achieve that. So accent walls have been a very easy way to achieve that focal point strategy. Now, 2 people have made this very popular. Number one is builders. So when you are a builder building a house, if you aren't building for people where you're like in a design studio and they are like picking things out and paying for all these extra things, you're kind of just building like the most basic house you can build, right? Like you're building things with the bare minimum and the upgrades that you know people are going to like really want, but nothing more. So this means not a lot of extra trim work. This means a lot of the walls are boxes, like the easiest thing to build. So if you look at builder grade, which is what people always refer to when they're like, I'm turning my builder grade house into something amazing. Like builder grade means we kind of got a basic house, right? Versus if you look at older homes, there's a lot more like woodwork, architectural interests, like slanted rooms, odd shaped rooms, because they were just more like artful, and they weren't also mass produced where you just needed a crew to like throw up the same floor plan again and again super fast so you could sell these. So as a builder, when you are staging these floor plans with furniture, you don't have focal points. You don't have like interesting walls or trim work. So to create these, they would paint one wall a color in almost every room, and they still do. Like if you go to model homes for builders, this is like the accent walls are everywhere. Like every room almost has one. And so they would paint that to kind of create this focal point where there was no other like actual architectural interest. And then I think that kind of just trickled down into the DIY community, because you would go like, not a lot of times is the everyday person encountering like high-end design, like you might in a hotel or a commercial space, but high-end residential design is something we either only see in magazines or, don't see at all. So you don't necessarily always see what designers are doing, but you might go tour the builders, like the new houses on a Saturday for fun. And so it just became, and then with social media, it just became like, oh, I'm going to paint this wall this color. And then HGTV and all the things. And so it just becomes like a very accessible way to create a focal point. It's very like, paint is easy. You don't need tools. It's low risk. You can try fun colors. You can undo it. So it just became a way for us to like play with color in our spaces in a way where we didn't have to fully commit to a full room of that color. And it's an easy weekend project, like paint one wall and call it done. So that's how they became popular. Whether or not you want to take that on in your space is totally personal preference. There's definitely people that still love them. I still love a good accent wall. I'm leaning more towards doing them with wallpaper and murals versus paint, but they still definitely have their place and they can look really great. So like no shade to accent walls, but high-end designers are a little like uppity about them, which I find funny. But it's also like, I mean, they have a lot more tools at their disposal. Like they have crews and they can install trim work. And if you're doing high-end design, like you're probably going to need to do better work than just painting a wall. So I get that. But yeah, if you don't like them, that's fine. Like a lot of other people don't like them too and would definitely agree with you. But that's kind of like how they came to be. That's the point. And they are easy and they still can look good in some context. So that's Accent Wall 101 and the drama happening within the design community. So choose your side now or don't. Okay, next question. What is my favorite room accessory? The one item you feel like you put in every room and why? Okay, so on the surface level, I would say mirrors and plants, because mirrors bounce the light around and make the space look bigger. So they're great for making things feel expanded. And then plants just make things look like alive. Like it just brings like a liveliness to the space, and they're very easy to add. And there's a lot of really good faux plants. So those are the two which we talked about earlier, but I'll give you a third one, and this one's kind of unexpected, and I would say it's lighting. So if you look at really high-end spaces, a lot of the times design elements aren't actually that different. Like the bed is expensive, but you could find a dupe of that bed that would give you a really similar vibe. Or the paint color you could also have. And so the actual items in the room, like you could find dupes of and kind of achieve a similar look and a similar feel. But what people struggle with is lighting, because lighting can just take your space to the next level if done correctly. I feel like I did a whole episode on this a while ago, so we might need to revisit that. But basically, there's 3 levels of lighting in the space. There's overhead or ambient light, like the big light. which is usually canned lighting, and that's just kind of the overall light level in the room. Then there's task lighting. So these are like specific lights you use for tasks. So think of like a desk lamp, lighting under your cabinets that you turn on when you're working on the counter, a floor lamp that you put next to your reading chair so that you can see to read. So lighting for actual like tasks that are going to help you get that task done. And then mood lighting or vibe lighting. So this is lighting that doesn't serve a function necessarily, but is used to create the mood in the space. So this could be like an art light above your art. Another one is like lights in plants. This is one of my favorite things. Like when you have like a tree or a plant in a corner of a room, you can get these little baby spotlights. They're battery operated and a lot of times have a remote, and it just looks like a little like hockey puck. And then this little baby light pops up and you can kind of point it like wherever you want, but you put it in the base of your plant, shine it up through the plant, and it kind of just creates depth, some shadow, some interest, and lights up a corner of the room. So that's a good like mood lighting addition. But it's things like that that are going to make your space look elevated and next level. And the thing with spaces that look more expensive or more elevated or more designer is there's a lot more complexity to them. And complexity not in that there's just more things, but in that there's more layers, there's more contrast, there's more elements that pull your eye or are interesting. So things like that, when you're layering lighting and plants and arts and mirrors and furniture and rugs, it's not just like the everyday functional things or the things you like think to put in, but it's considering the whole, like all the options, I guess. So yeah, if you're struggling to figure out what your space needs and you have all the basics, like you have furniture and a rug and your overhead light and maybe some art, think of lighting, think of plants, think of what was the other one? Mirrors. Yeah. And those can go a long way in your space without adding more like clutter. It doesn't feel cluttered when you add those. It feels like they're actually adding something to the space, and it's hard to go wrong. Okay. Next one. What is the first thing you ever DIY'd and what made you do it? Okay, this is real fun, you guys, because the video is still on YouTube and you can watch it. And it's really funny because I'm so awkward and so new, and I look like a deer in headlights, like telling you how to build this project. And it might be very fun either for comic relief or so you can see that like I had an embarrassing start too. Because I think like if you follow my work or you follow my Instagram and you see the videos where the transitions are real quick, in 30 minutes we're doing a whole backyard, it can be very easy to feel discouraged. Like, how am I ever going to get there? But when you can see where I started, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I can do this because that's where I am. So it was the first project I ever did was this bench. So we built our house in Denver. It was like builder grade style. We got to pick out some things, but we didn't upgrade a lot in the design center because Denver housing prices were expensive. So we buy our first house and it's kind of like, we always joked that it was a blank slate. Like I just bought a canvas. And so I was really invested in like, I'm going to make this like amazing. Like I'm going to decorate everything. And I was really into, I think, Fixer Upper at that point, maybe. Yeah, I feel like that was the Fixer Upper era. And just seeing like the possibility of like how a space could go from just basic to like something really amazing. And it didn't take like a lot. So the bench was my first era of like, I had a sander and a drill, but I was terrified to use a saw. Like bought a circular saw, which honestly is not the best saw when you're first starting out because you have to like steer it and there's no like hinge and there's nothing to keep it steady. So that was like a scary saw to use. So I didn't like use it. I refused to touch it. So I drew out this bench that I wanted to build out of just like basic lumber, like 2x4s and maybe like 2x6s, like chunky, like framing lumber, right? Because I didn't even know what like nice lumber was at that point, or that you could get lumber with square edges instead of like the rounded 2x4. But yeah, so I draw out this whole bench. I go to Home Depot and I have them help me cut the wood down into all the little pieces that it would take to build the bench. And then I just bring it home and screwed it all together with wood screws and sanded it down and painted it. And I had a little bench for the entryway. And it was, I mean, it's pretty cute. Like, I would probably use it still. I think I ended up selling it. I upholstered the top and then hated the fabric and then sold it. Um, but yeah, it's still a good style. I would use it. I would probably distress it and make it look more interesting now. But yeah, that was my first ever project. And then I remember somebody else like made it. Somebody watched my tutorial and made it, and she shared a video of like on her story of her and her son and the lumber like in the car. Like, she had just went and got the lumber to go build it and was like, I'm building him a bench. And she was like a newly single mom, and then built the bench for his room and then shared a picture. And I was like bawling because that was the first time I had ever made anything that somebody like remade. And I was like, oh, like my ideas actually can tangibly help people in their lives. Like, what? So that was really cool. That was the first thing I ever made. And 10 out of 10 would make again. And we should definitely watch this tutorial and laugh about it. It's like, maybe we should do a showing of all my old some of my old content. We can just watch clips and laugh at me. That would be fun, like a movie night. So you can see how embarrassing you can be at the start, and it's okay to be cringy. Yeah, so that's that. Just type in entryway bench never skip brunch and it'll come up. It's like, it was $12 because that was before the price of lumber increased by a ton because of COVID. So whatever boards I got, which was like 2 boards, it was only $12. So now if you made it, it would be more. So don't come for me. It was a long time ago, but yeah, that's, you'll find it. Don't worry. Okay. Next, what is your favorite source on inspo? Certain tags that you search. So, okay. Online inspo, which I try not to use a lot of because I feel like I'm so deep in this ecosystem of like everyone seeing the same inspo and doing the same things, which is like definitely still a good place to get inspo, but I'm obviously trying to bring new ideas to the online conversation. So I try not to rely on online inspo for my own work. However, if you're an everyday person doing your house, no shame in that. Like, it's so easy. There's so many resources. I would say I like Pinterest the best because when I'm in like an inspo state, I really like to be in my own brain. And so something about being on Pinterest where people don't really talk to each other, it's kind of just like a dreaming platform, planning platform. I like that the best. I also think like search on Pinterest is easier. Like, it's easier to type in terms and find what you want versus Instagram, where it feels like a person is showing you the idea and you have to comment on it, or it's harder to search. Like, their search is not as honed in. So Pinterest is definitely my go-to for online inspo. Tags that I like to search currently, because I'm renovating this 1840s house, so I'm trying to figure out how do we honor like the history of the house while giving it like a really fresh take and trying to toe that line. So I feel like Victorian, modern, antique are terms I'm searching a lot of on Pinterest. Another good way to find things, sometimes I find that it's like in my head, I know what I want, or it's like something weird I saw somewhere, like at an antique store where I'm like, ooh, what is this thing? And I don't quite know how to like ask the search bar to give me that. So I find I search something similar. And then if you tap on that pin and scroll underneath it, it shows you like related ideas. So sometimes if you're struggling with search and knowing what to put in, you just get started and then just kind of follow the trail of like finding something that's similar and then scrolling underneath and finding those related ideas. And that's how, yeah, I found a lot of stuff that I never would have known how to ask for. So that's cool. But yeah, those are the terms I'm using. So that's online inspo. As far as offline inspo, which is my favorite place to get inspiration, I would say hotel lobbies, restaurants, sort of like commercial inspiration. I think commercial spaces, they can go above and beyond because it really needs to be artful and interesting and captivating and like Instagrammable for people to want to take photos. And so the way you approach like commercial design is so different than your house. And so I think looking at that and seeing like creative things, whether it's use of materials or a mural or lighting or just something really interesting, I always like to take and be like, ooh, but you could do that in a house in this way, and it would be really cool. So that's my favorite place to find inspo. It also goes hand in hand with like traveling. A lot of people get really inspired by travel, whether it's like different cultures or like physical spaces that you see when you're traveling that are just so different. But I would say, yeah, hotels, restaurants, a lot of cool restaurants always give me inspiration. So that's where I get most of my inspo. Next, I'm pretty far into my DIY journey and I want to challenge myself more. What should a professional always do versus what should I challenge myself to learn? And where do you think the line is generally? This is a really good question because it can take a lot of practice to feel out that line and really get comfortable with like knowing where your limit is and knowing when to push yourself and learn something and challenge yourself that you don't yet know and you're uncomfortable, but it's going to help you grow, and know when not to push yourself because it's outside of your skill set and not worth it, because if you mess it up, it could really mess things up. So I guess the clear line for me is electrical and plumbing. I outsource 1,000,000%. I don't feel the need to save an extra $100 by doing that myself. Personally, I think the risk of me messing it up is too high. It's not something I'm interested in learning, and I outsource that. Now, I will change light fixtures and plugs and do basic electrical because my dad was an electrician. So I was taught how to do a lot of things, but I will never touch a panel or a breaker box. And there's a lot of situations I call in an electrician because I know better. So I would say if you're just starting out, those are really good, easy places to draw the line. Another thing is like structural stuff, like ripping out a wall. Like, is it structural? Like, don't guess. Your house could fall down. Get a professional. In terms of like the everyday of like expanding your skill set and how to know how to do that. And this is the part of the question that says like, where's that line and what should you challenge yourself to learn? So I feel like there's kind of 3 directions I see people going when they get into DIY. And the first one is like, you kind of go into furniture and you're interested in like building furniture, refinishing furniture, woodworking. And that kind of brings you into fine woodworking, which I have a lot of friends that own shops and make furniture, make cutting boards, make signs. And that's kind of a path that you can go in. So that's one. The next one would be like the home reno contractor style path where you're working on your house, renovating spaces, doing trim work and drywall and building things and ripping things apart. And that's kind of like the home reno path. And then there's like the designer path where maybe you don't really want to touch power tools and you're going to outsource a lot of that when it comes to like bringing your idea to life. But you do want to know kind of how to become your own designer and play with different design elements, rearrange your furniture, repaint walls, make little things like artwork. Those are kind of the 3 things when people get really into it. I feel like people kind of pick a lane and go all in on one of those. I've chose to go all in on all of those. So that's also an option. But that being said, this is going to kind of determine what tools you're going to need and where you push yourself to learn. So like fine woodworking, you're going to be wanting more specialized tools. Like you're going to be maybe getting a scroll saw eventually, or teaching yourself how to use a router, which is how you get like finished edges on things, or looking into getting a laser cutter. All my woodworker friends are very into laser cutters that like cut things out for you. And so that might be where you guide your skill set. And remember, my advice for expanding your skills is one project at a time, one tool at a time. So you think of the next project you want to make, what tools you would need to make that, and teach yourself a new tool along the way, finding support, whether it's YouTube tutorials, somebody that you know that can teach you how to use it, stuff like that. So for the renovator portion. This would be stretching your school skills in ways where it's kind of more the details and the nuance. So like maybe you've been working with the go-to basic nail gun, which is like an 18 gauge nail gun. And now you're kind of learning the nuance of like, ooh, sometimes I could use a pin nailer, which is a nail that's a lot smaller. So for my woodwork, I could use these tiny nails. They're a lot easier to fill. And I'm learning the difference between when do I need a structural nail that's going to like hold things together, that's thicker, and when can I use this BB pin nail because it's like little trim only for aesthetics, and that will work better. So you're expanding your skill set into new tools and kind of learning that like nuance of techniques, that you're doing the same kind of projects like trim or building things, but you learn different approaches. Or like drywall, like it used to be that you sanded drywall and had dust everywhere. And now you're learning to sand with a wet sponge because it's so much easier and it doesn't make a mess and it works just as good as the sanding blocks they try to sell you in the store. And then for design, this is like developing your eye and your sense of style. So expanding your skill set here is really like experimenting, moving your furniture around, painting things different colors, like trusting yourself to try new things and get different perspectives and develop your own creative point of view, which first starts by emulating others. Like you see something, you're like, ooh, I like that, I want to try it. And then kind of learning like how to do that for yourself. So you're not just like recreating inspo you see, you're kind of creating inspo that you're like, ooh, this is what I want to do, and I'm coming up with it. Yeah, so that's what I would say the path looks like. And if you're struggling whether or not to outsource, like if there's a chance things could get really ruined, like for electrical, you could get shocked or burn your house down. For plumbing, you could flood your entire house. For structural, your whole house could fall down. You're weighing the risk of things going wrong to decide whether or not it's worth it. And again, which I see all the time, hire the professional and follow them around and ask them to teach you. Maybe it's just me, but people really love this. Normally it's like a thankless job. Like they come in, they do the work and everyone's like, thank you, I paid you. People aren't really interested in the work a lot of times. So I find when my electrician or plumber, I'm like, hey, what are we doing? Can you show me what to do? They're like more than happy to tell me what they're doing and why. And so if you find the right kind of contractors, you can learn a lot and expand your skill set that way. Okay, last one. Do I know any good resources for easy DIY projects / starter projects, places to get plans with instructions and material list? I get overwhelmed on what exactly to buy and where to start following a video. So this, I will say, there's endless videos on the internet. There's not a lot of people teaching DIY technique. So you have to find those people that are actually teaching you step by step and how to. There's a lot of free videos, and the best way is to look for things that are like full tutorial, step by step, how to materials, like type those things in YouTube, because the mass volume of videos is just people showing you what they did and not fully breaking it down how to do it. In terms of like projects like plans and material list, I have a bunch of these on, it's called DIYDreamHome.shop, and that is where I put my tutorials. And when I say tutorial, there's plans, like a PDF, there is links to every single material that I used, and there's a step-by-step video to show you everything, how to build it. And it is my goal in 2024 to expand this so that more of my projects will have this, like that if you want to go actually do it, you have the resource to do it. Otherwise, you can just watch and enjoy. But yeah, that's where I'm seeing things go, because it's like everyone, there's so many DIY content creators now, which is amazing. But a lot of people are new. So they don't know how, like they know how to do it and they know how they did their project, but they don't know how to teach it. And so a lot of that is still missing. But there are still old school people that have been doing this for years on YouTube. So I would just type in like full tutorial, blah, blah, blah project with materials list, and kind of like enhance your search in that way to look for those free things. And then, yeah, if it's my project you want to create, DIYDreamHome.shop is where you can find that. Okay, so that's all the questions for this time. If you have questions of your own, I would love to answer them. Go to Instagram and DM at MakeSpacePod, or you can send an email to podcast@makespace.com. And depending how many we get, we could do this like monthly or just every once in a while, but I would love to answer your actual questions as well as telling you all my fun tips. So, see you next week.
Thanks for listening. And if you've got more episodes to catch up on, binge on. Don't let me stop you. But if you've got a second, you should come say hi on Insta at MakeSpacePod. And if you're an overachiever, you can also leave a review and I'll love you forever. If you're new here, hit that follow button to officially become a DIY queen and join all the amazing humans tuning in every week.